thought I would talk a little bit today about why I upgraded from the Canon 60D to the Black Magic Pocket Cinema 6K. Welcome everybody, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield, and long story short, with every project I'm working on for the show, pretty much, well, behind schedule, taking a lot longer than expected, I thought I'd talk a little bit about my camera gear this episode. So now for a long time now, I think almost 10 years, I got this guy like 2011, I've been using a Canon 60D for a lot of video projects, not much on this channel, but some other stuff like Story Michigan, things like that. And with the Canon R6 coming out soon, I was thinking about upgrading my gear anyway, but I ended up going with the Black Magic Pocket Cinema camera. So in a moment here, let me explain a little bit why I made that upgrade and not the Canon R6. But in case you happen to actually not be familiar with this camera, which maybe you are, maybe you're not, this guy right here is the Black Magic, like for the third time, Black Magic Pocket Cinema 6K camera. This guy here is a cinema camera, which is fancy video speak for basically saying it's intended to be part of a more complete professional video workflow than say a standalone product like a DSLR or like the consumer video cameras I've been using a lot for this channel when I'm down in the basement filming various build projects down there. Because ideally, you're going to spend a bit more money on kitting this thing out with some extra hardware. I haven't done that. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, why I run it like this. But if you really want to unlock the full power of this camera, you're going to need additional hardware on top of the camera body and the lens. You've got an Efs Lens Mount here for Canon lenses. You've got a nice big touchscreen on the back. In terms of video formats, it records in Black Magic RAW, which is a very high quality 6K format that's proprietary to the Black Magic software, so DaVinci Resolve and things like that. It also records in Apple ProRes, which is a little bit more universally accepted across software, but that format is 4K only. I know it's such a tragedy, isn't it? Only 4K! This is basically, this camera here is a huge upgrade to what I've been using before. You'll see in a moment. And it's just, even the 4K lowest quality settings with a kit lens for the Canon 60D on it is so much better than anything I've used in the past. It's like blowing my mind. But, yeah. So anyway, the ProRes though is only 4K. It can't use the full 6K resolution. So, you know, whatever. Now, the few limitations to know about this camera when compared to something like a DSLR is mainly, like I said, the little screen doesn't flip out, which is a really nice feature, but also the battery life on this camera is pretty atrocious, which is why most people, like me here, have this giant battery attached to it somewhere. This monster's battery gives it about 3 hours of life, maybe 3 to 4, somewhere in that range, whereas your typical Canon style DSLR battery here, if this was a real battery, it's plugged into the big battery, gets you about 20 to 30 minutes of operation time depending on details. So if you're used to a DSLR, this is a huge drop in battery performance. But there are certain advantages that come with this in terms of recording time and things like that. So, yeah. But also, one other bit of a minor issue for me for this camera compared to DSLR, this guy here is a lot heavier than the DSLR. This, even without the battery, this battery isn't actually that heavy. And I've got a Manfrotto tripod that works great with the 60D, but this camera is just a little too heavy for it. Not by much, but if I try to angle the camera down a little bit too much, it'll tip forward, and basically the tripod lock can't even hold the weight of this camera. So just keep that in mind. If you intend to upgrade to something like this, you might have to get a little bit beefier tripod if you're used to a DSLR. And you get a little bit of history of my video camera collection here, right next to a tub of water. I'm doing some wet sanding with one of the projects, and that's why there's a tub of water there. That's a bad idea considering what's all around here, but anyway, regardless. So why did I choose the Black Magic over, say, the Canon R6? The main advantage that I get with the Black Magic Pocket Cinema is I can leave it on and let it do its thing for a long period of time and not even have to think about overheating. The Canon 60D had a record limit of 15 minutes. The R6 is a little bit better, but it still has some overheating issues because it's not designed to basically run for long periods of time. If you see right here on the Black Magic, these little fins right here, this is a cooling system. So it's got a nice cooling system. I think there's even fins in the bottom too. So it definitely can run for hours and hours and hours, which in a studio setup like I have is quite important. Now, people have tried the R6 running for a few hours. You can find YouTube videos of people who have got pre-release models, and it works. The heat warning's going crazy and whatnot, but it does survive for a few hours in a studio setup. The fact that the heat warning is going off really makes me question if I'd want to do that over and over again, because I would do that a lot in this type of studio setup that I have here. So I'd rather just buy the camera designed for that. That's probably the main reason why I chose this camera. Now, we get to one of the other constraints as to why I chose this camera, because cameras like what Sony makes, a lot of those have better heat management issues and better record time, say, than the new Canon cameras do. The problem, though, is I've got several EF and EFS lenses. So if I were to jump to Sony, I'd have to either A, buy new lenses, because they use their own format, not the EFS standard, or I'd have to get some sort of adapter. And those adapters range in prices from kind of cheap to really expensive. They offer different features. And the other problem you'll run into is some of the EF lens adapters. So where you go from some type of system to an EF lens, they don't support all the EFS type mounts, because the EFS type lenses have a little bit of a different setup. If I ever take this lens off, there's actually an extra piece of plastic that's on the back of the EFS lenses that an EF lens, so I think this one here is an EF lens, don't have. So that's why oftentimes those adapters only work with the actual EF lenses, whereas the Black Magic Pocket Cinema 6K worked with both EF and EFS lenses. So I could basically swap over to this camera and keep using my existing lenses for my 60D and not have to spend an extra minimum $500 to more to get a new set of lenses. Now, I'm sure there's people out there crying and cringing because I'm running the Canon 60D kit lens on a cinema camera, but like I said, this setup here is incredibly better than what I've had before, so to me it sounds just, wow, this is amazing, right? And that also issue existed with the Black Magic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. So the 4K base is like $1,300. This guy base is like $2,000. But if I wanted to use EF lenses with the 4K, it's like a $700-ish speed booster, and that speed booster only works with EF lenses. It doesn't work with EFS lenses. So I'm not as flexible by going that route, even though it's a very similar price range for the 4K with that adapter as the 6K. So that's also another reason why I pointed to the 6K. So what then am I giving up if I'm going with the Black Magic Pocket Cinema camera versus the R6? Well, the biggest thing you're giving up is photography. Now, this guy here can take photos somehow. I guess there's a little photo button right there, but it's not really a photography camera. So if you really want professional photography, you probably want to look at some of the DSLRs like the R6. The guy I know who's buying the R6, he does freelance video work and photography. So with that combination, that's actually a very good thing for him. Whereas for myself, like I said, I needed more of a studio camera that's most of the time going to spend its life on a tripod, just recording myself. If I need to do photography, well, I've still got my little Canon 60D here. It's good enough for anything I'm going to be doing. I take photos of birds. The other thing you're giving up by going with the Black Magic Pocket Cinema camera is it's got no in-body stabilization, which, once again, this is going to sit in a tripod most of the life. It's not going to be a big issue. If it needs to go out in the field and I need really good stabilization, well, you've got lens stabilization, first of all, which most DSLRs will have, but I personally own both a glide cam, which is sitting up there, and I've also got a Ronin, which I don't know where that is. It's in somewhere in that room way down there. So I've got plenty of options for stabilization. I don't really need the in-body one. Even though in-body stabilization is really amazing if it's done right. I don't know how well the R6 handles it yet, but like my GoPro, I've used that a few times on this show. It has some sort of gyroscopic based image stabilization, and holy crap is that amazing. You can actually hold it by hand and move it like this with just your hand, and it looks like you're on a slider. So that would be a nice feature to have in terms of image stabilization, but once again, the ability to run the camera for hours and hours and hours is more important to me than having the occasional nice stabilization shot that I can already get other ways with tools that I already own. The other thing that I basically stuck with when it comes to the Black Magic Pocket Cinema is the Efs Lens Mount. Now, Canon with its mirrorless cameras is moving to a new lens standard. And they're finally, after, I don't know, a couple decades, I think, getting rid of the EF standard, which is kind of unfortunate. I won't be able to get, quote, the latest and greatest lenses, but there's some pretty awesome EF lenses out there that are a lot better than anything I have in my collection that I can probably be able to get cheaper in a few years because they're not going to be as useful as the new Canon series. So you know what? For the lifetime of this camera, I'm going to be quite happy buying some of the older EF lenses that are pretty freaking awesome. And if I want to dump the money into it, you can get cinema quality lenses in the EF mount. So that pretty much sums up why I went with the Black Magic camera over upgrading the DSLR, and honestly kind of ends the Canon dominance of my camera line. Before I had the HV20, it was a Samsung, but then I went Canon. The camera you're looking at right now, this guy is a Canon, and then the one that you can record me from the front over here, this guy is also a Canon camera. But you know what? I wanted a good quality studio camera, and that's what I got. So why don't I just finish off very quickly how I got this guy kitted out. I've already mentioned about the kit lens, the cheap piece of crap. I mean, okay, it's a $500 lens, that's what they cost, but they're cheap pieces of crap. Welcome to professional video gear. But I have no cage for this thing. I have the external battery just because you really have to get an external battery for it. I have only one battery that came with it. That's about 20-30 minutes of battery power. The Canon battery in here would work with it, but a little bit less battery power, maybe 15-20 minutes. So if I need to run without this guy, I can still run with it. And I've got only SD cards, as I mentioned, no CFast or no hard drive yet, so I'm kind of limited in terms of the resolution that I can record at. But that's all fine with me. I'm not planning to go ahead and do any high-end cinema productions yet, but if I need to, I can spend the extra $1,000 to kit this guy out. But like I said, this what you see here with the camera body, and the battery pack can be bought in a kit on BH Photo for like $2,200. You can get the SD cards kind of cheap. The one I have in here was on sale at Best Buy for $30. I got a better one sitting over there that I got from BH Photo for about $65. And then you can use whatever EF lens you got on here. In the end, well, like I said, I'm happy with the quality of it. I filmed the painting segments of both the Calhoun's Battle Mech and the Paladin Enforcer Speed Paint. And not only did I record those with this camera, but both of those were reframed in post. So I took the 4K recording I had here in the lowest quality ProRes setting, reframed them down to something a little bit closer to 1080p, and the quality is still far superior to what this camera in front of me can record, which is the same camera I've been doing my paint tutorials with. So even though this is a very basic kit, this camera is a ton better. And on top of it, you can actually just run this camera off the power cord, and you don't even need a battery in it, and it'll run for hours without any trouble. Once again, the main feature I wanted for this particular studio setup. Alright, so with that, thank you guys all for watching. Hopefully it just kind of gives you a little bit of a rambling thought into why I went with this camera versus a newer DSLR. And you'll be seeing this around in the studio more often, and starting pretty shortly with the next build video in the basement. It's going to be all shot with the Black Magic, so hopefully that one will be out not too far in the future. Let's see, what else do I have I was going to be working on? Oh, I've got some actual little stuff I'm working on for Ryan for Tales of Valhalla, so I'm doing a bit of custom terrain design for that, so that'll be out pretty soon. Then I'll be getting back to finishing up Micro Flash Delta, my 3-pound combat robot. And I think Battletech Clan Invasion is shipping soon. It sounds like it from their Kickstarter notices, so we'll be taking a look at that hopefully a few weeks in the future, not too far. And you know what? I'm having fun with those Battle Mech speed paints. We'll be doing more of those as well. So if you like combat robots, real and or fictional, or tabletop gaming, go ahead and hit subscribe on this YouTube channel, and then you can see what kind of crazy projects I'm working on. And in case you're wondering what kind of crazy project got my entire shirt dusty, this is actually my dinner. I made pancakes from a box and I opened the bag wrong and poof, it went everywhere. So yeah, that happens sometimes. But anyway, all right guys, have a great week.